warning of a witch hunt and asking aides what to expect from the hearings. And why is the former special counsel suddenly asking for his deputy to be sworn in with him? Suing everyone. President Trump files suit to prevent the release of his tax returns. He's suing the House Ways and Means Committee, the New York State Attorney General, and the New York Tax Commissioner. Did he leave anyone out? Reaching a deal. The Trump administration reaches agreement with congressional leaders on a budget deal that would raise the debt ceiling. Democrats are on board, but what about conservative Republicans? And Kim's submarine. North Korea shows photos of Kim Jong-un inspecting a new submarine under construction. Given the North's nuclear arsenal and missiles, the implications may be ominous for the U.S. and its allies. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Breaking news. Tension is building ahead of tomorrow's landmark testimony by Robert Mueller, and the former special counsel has just added to it with a last-minute request that his deputy be sworn in alongside him. A source says the deputy is expected to provide advice, but not to testify. Feverish preparations are underway for the back-to-back hearings by the House Judiciary Committee and the Intelligence Committee. Judiciary Democrats want to explore alleged obstruction by the president, while the Intelligence Committee will focus in on Russia's interference in the 2016 election. The Justice Department has instructed Mueller not to stray beyond the boundaries of his report. For the dozens of Democrats who are pushing for an impeachment inquiry, this could be a do-or-die moment. For Republicans, it could be a chance to shut the door on the Russia probe, while President Trump is showing signs of agitation, once again speaking of a witch hunt. I'll speak with Democratic presidential candidate, New York Mayor Bill de Blasio, along with Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi of the Intelligence Committee. And our correspondents and analysts will have full coverage of the day's top stories. First, let's go straight to our senior congressional correspondent, Manu Raju. Robert Mueller, Manu, he's made a last-minute request to have his deputy sworn in to appear at his side in tomorrow's hearings. What are you learning?
Yeah, late drama in these months-long negotiations to bring in the special counsel after the Democrats were told by the special counsel's team that he wanted Aaron Zebley, his deputy, to be sworn in alongside him. Republicans objected, saying this was a last-minute change. They said this was not the way that this was agreed to initially, but we are now told by sources familiar with the matter that Zebley will in fact be there, but he will not be sworn in. He'll be sitting alongside the special counsel to provide an advice and counsel to Robert Mueller as he gets questions for hours tomorrow in a public setting before the House Judiciary Committee, followed by the House Intelligence Committee. But for hours today, there were questions about exactly what would happen in this very high-stakes hearing with millions of people watching. The chairman of the committee just told us moments ago the hearing will undoubtedly go on, and they explained how the format will take place. The hearing going to go on tomorrow?
The hearing is going to go on tomorrow.
We want this hearing to be about Director Mueller. We're in discussions with them about the role of his counsel, and those discussions are ongoing. I expect that he will be there, but we would like to make sure that to the degree that he participates, that it may be on technical issues or other matters. We don't want him as a substitute for Mueller's voice.
Now, right now in the door right next to me, the House Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee are having a mock hearing to go through exactly their lines of questioning for the special counsel tomorrow. They are trying to narrow down their lines of questioning to a handful of areas that they believe will be digestible to the American public, roughly 5 areas of potential obstruction of justice involving the president's effort to allegedly fire the special counsel, to allegedly limit the scope of the investigation to exclude him, as well as potential witness tampering that the president appears to have been involved in, according to the Mueller report. Those questions will take shape tomorrow. Republicans have a different plan. They want to poke holes in the credibility of the special counsel's team, raise questions about alleged bias by the special counsel. So all the negotiations of the format really just a preview of tomorrow's very dramatic testimony, as Democrats hope this reshapes the narrative and the public understanding about alleged criminal conduct in the White House, but others are downplaying the impact this will have, and Republicans hoping it does what the president has hoped, to show, in his view, that he was exonerated.
Wolf. Manu Raju up on Capitol Hill. Stand by. I want to bring in our crime and justice reporter, Shimon Prokopez. Shimon, why is Mueller insisting on having his deputy by his side?
Quite honestly, for me, it seems that they want to protect Mueller whichever way they can. They want to give him cover. So they were hoping to have him sit there and answer some of the questions that the committee members were going to have. And what we're seeing here from the letter yesterday that the Department of Justice published from Mueller asking for guidance about what he can testify to, what he can't testify to. And now we have word that Mueller wants his deputy. Yes, he was a deputy special counsel there sitting next to him, wanted him answering questions. The committee says, no, that's not going to happen. It all seems to be every effort possible from all sides, certainly from the Mueller folks, that they want to protect Robert Mueller from what's going to happen tomorrow from the Republicans. And there could also be from the Democrats. There's going to be a lot of tough questions posed to him from the Democrats. And it seems that by all accounts, everyone wants to protect Mueller. A spokesman for Mueller did release this statement. He said that Aaron Zebley was the deputy special counsel and had the day-to-day oversight of the investigation conducted by the office. He will accompany special counsel Mueller to the Wednesday hearing, as was discussed with the committees more than a week ago. They're saying this was no surprise to them. We'll see what happens tomorrow.
Was it a last-minute decision on the part of Mueller?
This is what they're saying. But why are we just learning of this today? It's not entirely clear. It's the same reason why did we just learn of the letter yesterday from the Department of Justice that Mueller was seeking guidance about what he can't and can't testify to. It all seems like everyone right now wants to protect Robert Mueller from about what's to happen tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of tough questions, and they're trying to insulate him. I mean, it's the only reason why you would want someone else, I think, sitting next to him.
Yeah, clearly there's a lot at stake right now. Shimon, stand by as well. President Trump appears to be on the edge right now, just ahead of Mueller's testimony. Let's go to our White House correspondent, Caitlin Collins. Caitlin, the stakes clearly are very high for the president.
Yeah, and Wolf, officials back here at the White House have been downplaying that upcoming testimony tomorrow. But behind the scenes, they're paying close attention to what is going to happen tomorrow, including that last-minute drama that you just heard there from Manu and Shimon, as the president himself sounds irritated that the man who's been leading this investigation is now going to be front and center in front of the cameras.
On the eve of Robert Mueller's Capitol Hill testimony,
how about this whole witch hunt?
The White House is bracing for impact.
First of all, it's very bad for our country.
Tonight, sources telling CNN President Trump has spent the last several days discussing Mueller's upcoming appearance, and he seems more irritated than anxious that he has to watch the man who has loomed over his presidency take center stage.
I saw Mueller testify tomorrow again. How many times? Two and a half years.
Trump has been quizzing people about what to expect, while complaining that Democrats will never let the investigation go.
They think this is helping them.
His Republican allies are assuring him it won't change a thing.
I've heard all I need to hear from Mueller.
But even if Mueller reveals nothing new, sources say Trump wants to expose the investigation as the hoax he believes it is.
Actually, it started practically from the time I came down on the escalator.
Trump tweeting that Republicans should turn the tables by asking, why were all of Clinton's people given immunity? And why were the text messages of Peter S. and his lover, Lisa Page, deleted and destroyed right after they left Mueller and after we requested them?
I'm not going to be watching, probably. Maybe I'll see a little bit of it.
And while Mueller will be front and center in front of the cameras, Trump's schedule is currently wide open. The focus on Mueller in Washington may help a budget deal that's facing blowback from fiscal conservatives pass through Congress and win the president's signature. Congressional leaders and White House officials are working overtime to sell the deal that raises spending levels by $320 billion over the next 2 years.
It's a pretty good deal under the circumstances. That's the way I would put it.
Joining us now, Democratic Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy of Illinois, a member of the Intelligence Committee. Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. Do you have any reservations, first of all, about letting Mueller's deputy, Aaron Zebley, testify alongside him?
My understanding is that he's not going to necessarily testify, but he'll be there so that Robert Mueller can, occasionally seek his advice. But I hope that, we're not going to be interrupted by consultations as much as Mr. Mueller has a chance to kind of speak his mind and tell us what's in the report and why it matters.
Will Aaron Zebley be formally sworn in as a witness, or will he just sit there as an aide to the former special counsel and whisper in his ear from time to time?
I'm not sure. I think that's being hashed out right now, although it appears that he will be at least accessible to Mr. Mueller.
Your colleagues on the House Judiciary Committee plan to focus their questions on issues surrounding potential obstruction of justice by the president. Your committee, the Intelligence Committee, is going to focus in on Russian interference in the 2016 election. What's the biggest question you have for the former special counsel on that front?
I have several questions, but I think the biggest question is, what did he find and what does it matter, especially with regard to the Trump campaign having advanced knowledge of this interference that was about to happen in 2016, then welcoming it, then using the product of that interference, having numerous contacts with Russians, which they didn't report to the FBI or law enforcement, and then finally covering it up. And so we'll be asking Mr. Mueller about all those things. Plus, did he look at the counterintelligence aspects of the links, the 140 plus links between the Trump campaign and Russia, even if it didn't amount to a criminal conspiracy? Because,
as you know, the Mueller report concluded on this sensitive issue of collusion, whatever you want to call it. He doesn't use the word collusion. Mueller's report said the evidence was not sufficient to charge that any member of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with representatives of the Russian government to interfere in the 2016 election. That's a significant statement, which I assume Mueller is going to repeat tomorrow.
He will likely do that. But on the other hand, there were so many links. Just take one example, Trump Tower, Moscow, where the president repeatedly said he had nothing to do with Russia. Meanwhile, Michael Cohen, his personal attorney, was negotiating a deal to build the Trump Tower in Moscow. And the reason why that's significant is that if the Russians know that the president is not telling the truth, they can use that information to compromise him. And that's very serious, and that is the source of counterintelligence concerns in this investigation.
The Department of Justice has instructed Mueller to stick to his report, the 448-page report. Will that significantly impact the questions that you guys, the lawmakers, will ask Mueller?
Well, as you know, he's not necessarily confined to that report, despite what DOJ is asking, and we are not necessarily confined in asking questions. That being said, I think that we will be very happy to hear him talk about what's in the report, because him giving voice to those findings will likely be the first time that much of the audience who has not read the report will actually hear what it's about. As you know, this is kind of like, a lot more people have seen the movie Godfather rather than read the book.
Should Mueller ignore those instructions from the Justice Department?
I think that, look, he is a man of high integrity and honor. He's a patriot. I think he has to do what's right. If the Justice Department and Bill Barr are somehow instructing him not to talk about certain things, even though he should talk about them at the hearing, then he should do what's right and answer the questions. Because at the end of the day, this is about protecting our country and our national security as well.
88 Democrats so far in the House support beginning formal impeachment proceedings against the president. You're not among them. Could Mueller's testimony tomorrow change your mind?
Possibly. He's one person who commands a tremendous amount of stature and credibility, and depending on what he says, a lot of people's minds could be changed tomorrow. And so that's why I think tomorrow's hearing is so important, and that's why I think so many people are going to watch it as well.
Some Democrats hope Mueller's testimony will certainly bring his report to life, as you say, but do you worry, Congressman, it could backfire and instead give the president potentially fresh ammunition that the investigation is over and it's time for the country to move on?
I don't think so. I think that the conclusions of the report were so significant, and such a small portion of the country has actually read the report, that I think tomorrow it's going to be about educating the public, and I think a lot more people are going to understand the import and the significance of what he found. And hopefully that will be an impetus for action as well in protecting our 2020 elections from similar interference by Russia and our other adversaries.
We'll, of course, have special coverage all day tomorrow. Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Wolf.
Up next, with the next round of debates only a week away here on CNN, I'll speak live with Democratic presidential candidate New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. There you see him. Trump is showing signs of irritation just ahead of Robert Mueller's testimony, calling the Russia investigation once again a witch hunt and asking allies what to expect from the hearing. Breaking news following the last-minute scrambling up on Capitol Hill as the House Judiciary and Intelligence Committees prepare to question the former special counsel Robert Mueller. President Trump is described as irritated about tomorrow's public testimony. With us now here in the Situation Room, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. He's running for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination. Mayor, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you, Will.
So what are you expecting from Mueller's testimony tomorrow?
I think we'll hear the truth. I think Mueller's a guy that actually is respected across this country. And at press conference, he was trying to tell us something more. That was clear. So I think some of the questions will give us an opportunity to hear maybe a deeper thinking from him.
So what specifically would you want him to answer? What do you want to learn tomorrow? What do you think the American public should be hearing?
I think the obvious question, if it were not for the restrictions that he was told were placed on him, would he have seen a path to prosecution? And I think the report, I mean, from my read of it, the answer is yes, but I think they're going to try and get him to say it out loud.
Because the Department of Justice guidelines is the sitting president can't be indicted. You're raising questions about that guideline?
It makes no sense. It doesn't fit with American values and American history. How can one person be above the law? You know, we read about this in other countries where folks want to be president or prime minister to avoid prosecution. You don't think of that in the case of the United States of America. We think of what happened to Richard Nixon as an example of the system working and finding corruption, do something about it. It made no sense that Mueller's hands were tied, and I think the committee and the American people are going to want to hear him say out loud, well, you know, if he had his druthers, what would he do?
The Department of Justice guideline, a sitting president can't be charged or indicted, but the House of Representatives can begin impeachment proceedings against the sitting president of the United States. So you support that,
yes.
But most of the Democrats in the House of Representatives still oppose formal impeachment proceedings, at least at this point.
Wolf, the straw that broke the camel's back for me was that Oval Office interview where the president invited hostile nations to share dirt on his opponents with him, you know, invited treason in effect. And I saw that and I said, wait a minute, this guy is, you know, he's been extreme in so many ways, but that goes beyond anything that's acceptable in America. We've got to start the impeachment process. The evidence has to come out. The American people have to be convinced during that process. And I also say as a Democrat, Democrats should not only talk about impeachment. I fear sometimes they do too much. Talk about the issues of working people too. Show we're doing the work that Americans sent us to do, not just talk about it.
Because a lot of the Democratic leadership fears exactly what you're saying, focusing on Trump, impeachment. You're ignoring all the substantive issues like health care, infrastructure, stuff like that has to be worked out.
And it's a real danger. Now, I do want to give the House credit. They passed the $15 minimum wage in the last days. They showed the willingness to act on something that's an actual kitchen table issue that affects everyday people, working people. That's good. But they got to keep that balance all the time. Keep talking about those kitchen table issues that affect everyday Americans. If it's just impeachment, I think a lot of voters will say, well, whoa, this is not about us. And one of the things that I'm working on is to push this Democratic Party of mine to talk about working people, which bluntly has not been the Democratic agenda for a long time, to actually talk about things like that $15 minimum wage, how to make sure that people have decent working conditions, some time off each year, some paid vacation, which millions of Americans don't have, the right to keep your job, and if you're challenged by a boss, actually having some due process. Just cause termination, not just whatever the boss thinks. These are the kinds of things, and I put it in this Workers' Bill of Rights, Wolf. This is what this election could be about for Democrats. And I'll tell you something, in 2016, we lost a lot of working people because they didn't hear Democrats talking about their lives, what it meant for them to try and make ends meet. If the Democrats this time talk about working people, I think you're going to see a very different result.
Well, we'll find out fairly soon. Let me get your thoughts on the president, making it clear that he's going to continue his attack on these 4 progressive Democratic congresswomen, all of color. It's part of his political strategy, seems to be emerging, looking ahead to the 2020 presidential election. He wants them to be the face of your party. What do you say about that?
It is a clear tactic to try to distract people from the more essential issues. In the end, voters do vote according to those kitchen table issues. And here's my argument. Trump goes after those 4 women, demonizes them, tries to create a racial divide, tries to blame immigrants for all the problem in the country, all the problems that regular, everyday, working class, middle class Americans are suffering, when in fact the truth is the challenges everyday people are facing, they are caused by those in power. They're caused by Wall Street. They're caused by the big corporations. And people are angry, Wolf. They're really angry about their circumstance. It came out in 2016 in frustration. Folks voted for Donald Trump, but probably disagreed with him on a lot of things, but they thought maybe he'll shake things up. Democrats cannot let that happen again. Trump is succeeding if he manages to demonize these women, and Democrats do not come back and say, no, that's unacceptable. And in fact, what Trump is really doing is baiting and switching, giving away the store to the 1% and trying to distract people from it.
Let me get your thoughts on a very sensitive issue that occurred in New York City. The president the other day once again directly blamed Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for scuttling the new Amazon project in New York City that the president said would have created so many jobs. You were a champion of that deal until it fell apart. Listen to what the president said about the Congresswoman.
One of them kept Amazon out of New York. Tens of thousands of jobs. Would have been a great thing. And she kept Amazon from going. Would have been a good deal. I mean, could he have made better? Maybe. But tens of thousands of jobs. And New York has not been the same since that happened. It's really hurt New York and New York City.
He's a New Yorker. You're a New Yorker. What's your response to the president?
He was a New Yorker.
He's still got a place in New York.
Yeah, I'm not sure he's welcome back when this is over. So the bottom line, Wolf, he's wrong on pretty much every score. New York City economy is strong. We've been adding jobs since Amazon made their decision, and that's the crucial point. Amazon made the decision.
But do you blame her in part for Amazon? Because she was one of those urging Amazon to get out of New York City. She thought it was going to hurt the working class.
She was wrong, in my opinion, and I said it at the time, because it was a plan that would have brought us tens of thousands of jobs and a huge amount of tax revenue that we could have done things like affordable housing. So it's a major setback for New York City. On that, you agree with the president. But I disagree with the way he thinks it went down. Amazon walked away. We had a deal. They walked away from the deal.
But you understand why they walked away, given all the political pressure.
I don't buy it. I don't buy it.
Because there were so many other communities across the country that were dying for Amazon to come.
They made a deal, and they walked away. It's not even her congressional district. So I disagree with what she assumed about the deal. But let's put the horse before the cart. Amazon had a deal. Everything was moving along. In the dead of night, they just said, we're out of here. I don't put that on her. I put that on them. But it was a lost opportunity for the communities that would have benefited, for sure. New York City is doing just fine nonetheless. We have 4.5 million jobs. We're doing just fine.
Let's talk about the former Vice President Joe Biden, arguably the front runner still right now. He released his criminal justice reform plan. I don't know if you've had a chance to go through it, but it's already being criticized by several of your colleagues, including New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, who said Biden's policy falls short of the transformative change our broken criminal justice system needs. Do you see shortcomings in Biden's plan?
Sure. And Wolf, the bigger problem with Joe Biden is that he is associated with so many things that have backfired on everyday Americans. So that criminal justice plan, he led the way in the crime bill in the 90s. And it backfired, and it helped create mass incarceration. He was a strong backer of NAFTA. We lost 1 million manufacturing jobs. NAFTA's coming back again. How are people going to trust if it's Joe Biden that he's not going to make the same mistake again? Here's a guy who voted for the Iraq war. I respect his service to the country, but he has to answer these concerns, because how is it believable? We got to take on Donald Trump, who's a very tough customer. We got to beat him by showing we are the party of change, that we're actually going to change the lives of working Americans. Democratic Party is not entirely believable to a lot of working class and middle class Americans. We've got to show them something different. How is Joe Biden going to say he's anything but the candidate of the status quo? He had a big fundraiser in New York. It was well reported. He invited the media in. And he literally said to some of the richest people in New York City, don't worry, nothing's going to change if I'm president. How is that going to tell working people that they should have any faith in the Democrats?
So at the CNN debate in Detroit, you're going to be on the stage with Vice President Biden. You're going to look at him. What are you going to say to him?
Look, I'm not going to go over to every strategy right now, but I'll tell you the bottom line. The bottom line is we have to put working people first in America. And Democrats have to be the party of working people again. We are not seen that way by enough working people. And if we don't fix it, we're going to lose this election. So if I happen to have a conversation with Joe Biden, I'm going to challenge him. I'm going to challenge all my colleagues. Prove that you're not part of the status quo. Prove that you're actually willing to do things like this Bill of Rights that literally put power back in the hands of working people, take it away from multinational corporations. Prove you're not going to just approve another NAFTA, which Donald Trump wants Democrats to do right now. And Wolf, I am scared that a lot of Democrats in the House and Senate are going to quietly vote for a new NAFTA and dig that hole again for working Americans. I think there's a lot to talk about in Detroit, and it's how are we going to be the party of change again?
But you don't have to wait to have an opportunity. If you want to go after Biden in that debate, you can just do it.
Unquestionably. But the point is, it's not just about Joe Biden. It is the heart and soul of the Democratic Party.
And he doesn't represent the heart and soul of the Democratic Party.
He is absolutely a Democrat, and I give him credit for some real good public service. But I have to say, if we're at a moment where we have to change or die, let's be clear, we have to either be the party of change, be the party that will resist a broken status quo, show working people in all those states in the Midwest that went for Trump, show working people that we actually are on their side again, not on the side of 1%. I challenge Biden. I challenge all Democrats. Prove to people that that's who you are. I can prove it because of what I've done in New York. We've done a host of things to put money back in the hands of working people. I'm going to challenge people because this is a fight we better have now. It's not a fight that can wait for the debate stage with Donald Trump. If Donald Trump can run to the left of the Democrat and act like he's more on the side of working people than the Democrat, that's what he did in 2016. He got away with it. If he can do it again, we're in a really bad place as a party. We're
going to see you in Detroit next Tuesday and Wednesday, the first round on Tuesday, second round on Wednesday. CNN will have obviously will host that debate next week.
Looking forward to it.
Mayor, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you, Will.
Good luck out there on the campaign trail. We're going to get a lot more information coming in right now about the former special counsel Robert Mueller's last-minute request to allow his top aide to join him at tomorrow's hearing. Also, the president's legal team sues to keep congressional investigators from seeing the president's tax returns. We'll be right back. The breaking news, President Trump is described as irritated, and there's been plenty of last-minute jockeying going on up on Capitol Hill just ahead of the former special counsel Robert Mueller's public testimony about his investigation. Let's bring in our legal and political analyst. We'll discuss the latest developments. And Laura Coates, what do you make of this request? Maybe it's a last-minute request by Mueller to bring his top deputy in to sit alongside him.
It tells me he wants to give comprehensive answers, and he wants them to have one bite at this testimonial apple. He doesn't want to go back and say, let me check it out, I'll figure it out, I'll come back to you. He wants this to be the moment he turns to the person and says, you know the answers, let me get back to them right now. It also shows to me that he's hoping to be able to have not evasive answers, but actually forthcoming, be candid, and actually give them the information they're seeking. And also someone maybe to nudge him or remind him, we're actually not talking about that. We may have 12 of other investigations to have to report on. Sir, let's tamp it down.
What do you think of the Justice Department's warning to him in this letter that they sent him last night, saying he should stay within the constraints of his official 448-page report?
Well, thanks for that opinion, people at DOJ. But in reality, he can stay in the four corners of the actual report and still be very comprehensive. The questions people have are not asking him to go beyond that. It's about going behind the scenes and behind the 448 pages worth of sound bites there. Also, the idea of trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube, trying to assert now executive privilege and saying, please be quiet about privilege issues. You had all these interviews. You had 500 witnesses. You had thousands of subpoenas issued. Now you'd ask them to say, when the public has a chance to hear it from the horse's mouth, to be quiet? I don't think so.
But Mueller asked for this letter.
And he asked for guidance. Right.
But he wanted the guidance, so it's sitting right there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he's a reluctant witness, as we all know. Mm-hmm. So he can look at this guidance and say, well, the Department of Justice says, I can't really answer that because of privilege. And then he's got somebody who worked with him in the counsel's office sitting on the other side of it, saying, well, you can't really answer that question. So I wonder if this means that, Mueller is sort of cocooning himself in a way against the committee's questions.
Well, here's why I wonder about the cover, though, in that area. Because remember, he has a conflict a little bit, not in terms of ethical, but with Barr, essentially trying to say, here's the cover I need. He wants to be able to address what Barr did to roll this out and how the DOJ did not cover him.
Exactly.
Ryan, it's pretty clear what the Democrats want to achieve tomorrow, but the Republicans, they have their own agenda, and they're going to get almost as much time for the questioning.
Yeah, look, they have to make a decision whether they're going to go with one of the two strategies that Trump and Republicans have toyed with. One is that this report just exonerates the president and that, Mueller is this great investigator. He looked at everything and it's pure exoneration. The flip side of that is a lot of them have argued, this was, he was conflicted from the beginning and this entire investigation was a hoax, and that it's more about, damaging his credibility. And I think basically as a team, they want to pick one of those or the other because they're not in harmony. And Trump goes back and forth with his tweets between those two.
We all remember, Carl Bernstein, your excellent reporting, Bob Woodward's excellent reporting during Watergate. We remember the Watergate hearings that eventually resulted with new information that caused then President Nixon to resign. Do you think there's a make or break moment like that potentially that could occur tomorrow?
Seems unlikely, because in the Watergate hearings, you had the testimony of John Dean from the inside turning dramatically on the President of the United States with a minute-by-minute account of the President's direction of the cover-up. So I don't think something like that is likely. But one thing that's happening here is that we now have an Attorney General of the United States who's put a gag order on the special prosecutor. And the difference between Watergate and this is that the system worked in Watergate because Republicans were open to joining Democrats in trying to learn the truth rather than suppress it. And what we're seeing so far about tomorrow is the Attorney General and the Republicans want to continue to suppress the truth and are happy that a cover-up may well be ongoing.
So you don't think we'll get a John Dean type bombshell from Robert Mueller tomorrow?
There is redacted material that in Watergate, for instance, the redacted material reached the Congress of the United States. Very significant, as Laura, I think, knows better than anybody. But here, there's no access to that redacted material. There has been an assiduous attempt to keep the American people and the Congress of the United States from the facts in this investigation beyond those in the Mueller report itself, and it's quite extraordinary.
It was very clear today, Laura, the president is clearly irritated by Mueller's upcoming testimony tomorrow morning. He suggested earlier today that the U.S. Constitution basically gives him the right to do whatever he wants. Listen to this.
Then I have an Article 2 where I have the right to do whatever I want as president, but I don't even talk about that because they did a report and there was no obstruction.
What's your reaction? Because you know the Constitution.
Well, apparently he does not, Wolf Blitzer, in that respect. Think about it. The entire premise is the separation of powers and three co-equal branches of government whose job it is to impose checks and balances as appropriate, and it's a government of, for, and by the people. So the notion that the president would be able to be a king and that constituents are now subject is completely off the mark. In addition to that, we have heard the president ad nauseum talk about all the reasons he could do what he wants to do. One point in particular is why we want to hear from Mueller tomorrow, because he has been able to stonewall Congress's attempts to actually impose those checks and balances. So the question is, what did Mueller intend for them to do about it? With a process or an indictment?
Well, he's parroting his lawyers, because his lawyers have been saying to him this entire time, Article 2 of the Constitution allows you to fire anybody you would like, meaning James Comey, for example, and it gives you extraordinary authority over the entire executive branch. What it doesn't do is give him the right to do something illegal, which he should not be doing. And Carl, you know about this better than anybody.
But he has a habit of doing it.
But so the president is saying, oh, have you ever heard of remember he said, have you ever heard of Article 2? Well, this is what he's been hearing from his lawyers. And so he feels, well, I've got Teflon on. There's nothing that can touch me.
He's mangling this, serious legal case that some on the right make, that if you obstruct justice or something that looks like obstructing justice in the course of using your Article 2 powers, that's not actually obstruction of justice. Now, that's not exactly what he said, but that's the sort of that's the germ. But even that, obviously, is a very controversial view
of unlimited power designated to the President of the United States at the expense of the other branches of government.
But it isn't unlimited power because
of course
if he does something really, really bad, there's an impeachment proceeding that can begin in the House, impeachment, and then a trial in the Senate. If convicted, he's removed from office.
Yes, that could happen. But what you have, again, you had Nixon, who asserted similarly that he was above the law, but he did it in private, his assertion. What's so unusual here is that the President of the United States gets up almost every day and really asserts, I am above the law. I am contemptuous of the law. I will do what I want.
Hold on for a moment. We're getting some breaking news coming into the Situation Room. I want to go to our justice correspondent, Jessica Schneider. Jessica, what are you learning?
Well, Wolf, we are just learning in the past few minutes tonight that the Department of Justice will be launching a formal antitrust review of the nation's biggest tech companies. The DOJ not saying exactly what those companies would be, but it could encompass Google, Amazon, Facebook. Now, we have known that the DOJ has been inquiring into Google in tandem with the FTC at the beginning stages of a probe of some other tech companies, but now the DOJ is confirming that this antitrust review is happening and it will explore how digital platforms compete and deal with consumer demands. This is of note because the topic of privacy and competition and fairness of these search engines has really been a hot topic on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers in recent days and weeks have held multiple hearings grilling these tech executives about their practices. And in particular, President Trump has been lashing out repeatedly over the past several months on Twitter in interviews, going after Facebook and Twitter and Google, calling a lot of these companies biased against conservatives. Even the Attorney General, Bill Barr, at his confirmation hearing in January, talked about how these companies, these behemoths, as he called them, aren't being properly investigated, saying once he got into the DOJ that was something that he wanted his antitrust division to look into. So now, Wolf, we know that the DOJ will be launching this extensive review, a widespread review of these digital and tech platforms like Google and Amazon and Facebook. The way they're putting it is they're going to be looking at how these online platforms have achieved market power and are engaging in practices that, as they put it, have reduced competition, stifled innovation, and harmed consumers. So we've been kind of awaiting something from DOJ, and Wolf, now we know that this big review is happening, likely sending shockwaves now through Silicon Valley.
I'm sure it is. Jessica Schneider, thank you very much. Laura Coates, give us your analysis. This is a major development.
It is. And of course, we had that signal from Bill Barr's confirmation hearing about him taking tech companies very seriously. There is an interesting coincidence. The president also happens to have an issue with each of those particular companies. And now it's a priority of DOJ, but it does still have bipartisan support. Well, the interesting thing about this issue will be how they're able to get information about whether they have engaged in unfair practices. It would require them to hand over documents. Will it be voluntarily? Will it be through subpoena? Will this be a contentious battle to say, it's possible you may have become the so-called behemoth lawfully, but in the event you didn't, hand me all of your documents. Include things about search engines, user profiles, user search tendencies and tactics. We're going to have a very long road ahead of us, and it's going to be about privacy.
It has significant political implications, Gloria, as well. A bunch of Democrats have been talking about stricter regulations as well as far as these big tech companies.
And it's sort of strange bedfellows. We were talking about this. You could have somebody like Elizabeth Warren, who's called for the breakup of these companies, joining with conservative voices who feel like they've been treated unfairly by these companies. I think the question that I have is that the president himself has suggested that the United States should sue Google and Facebook. And is this the result of that? Or is this something else? And will that complicate their case? Because the president has weighed in to a degree.
He often criticizes these big tech companies as being biased against conservatives.
Yeah. And look, we'll have to see more about what they're investigating, but I don't think what they're investigating is that. I don't think Trump and a lot of people on the right believe that Twitter and Facebook, their algorithms can sometimes be biased against right-wing views, right? But that is not an antitrust issue. I'm not an antitrust expert, but I don't think that's an antitrust issue. What it looks like the Justice Department is looking at is, frankly, what the same thing that Elizabeth Warren and other Democrats have been concerned about is anti-competitive behavior.
Carl, how do you see it?
Well, the first thing is that The whole question of this attorney general conducting this kind of a politicized investigation seems to me is fraught. And if there were ever an occasion for the do-nothing Congress of the United States to have a select committee, both Republicans and Democrats joining together to look at the whole question of privacy, of the power of these companies. It is a great subject to be undertaken on a bipartisan basis. But trust this attorney general in this atmosphere to do it, and the antitrust division of the Justice Department, I wouldn't.
You think there's bipartisan cooperation?
Well, there could
just
be.
the head?
I would never predict that, Wolf. But I do think that there are people on both sides of the aisle who agree that these companies need to be looked at seriously, not necessarily broken up the way Elizabeth Warren believes they should be. But I think that there's enough interest in it. So a serious investigation, like Carl talks about, would be something that lots of folks on Capitol Hill
including First Amendment
would
questions
entertain.
that enter into it, which is very important.
Exactly, but not what the president is talking about, which is they're not nice to conservatives.
This is a significant development. We're going to have a lot more on this. Thank you. There's more breaking news on another investigation by Democrats into the president. President Trump has just filed suit in federal court to prevent the release of his tax returns to Congress and New York officials. Let's go to our politics and business correspondent, Christina Alessi. What are you learning, Christina?
Well, Trump's attorneys are fighting back in this lawsuit, essentially saying that Trump's attempts to get at Trump's tax returns are political retributions, acts of political retribution. And just to give you some background here, New York State passed a law that would allow New York lawmakers to hand over Trump's state tax returns to Congress if they request it. Now, Trump's attorneys saying these efforts to get at his tax returns violate his First Amendment right to free speech because it's essentially punishment for his political views. Now, it's unclear whether that legal strategy is going to work in court. And also, I just want to make clear that the House Ways and Means Committee wants President Trump's federal tax returns, not his state tax returns. So I don't think that this has an impact on the House Ways and Means Committee's efforts to get at his federal taxes.
Do we know, Christina, what provoked this latest lawsuit from the president?
It appears, based on my reporting and what I've been hearing, is that the president has been emboldened by the fact that the courts have been siding with him over the last several weeks, particularly when it comes at attempts to disclose his financial documents and information, particularly two cases. A judge sided with him in regard to an anti-corruption suit that was brought by Maryland and D.C. A judge also hit the pause button on Democratic efforts to get information out of his company. So we all know that Trump likes to hit from a position of strength. He likes to attack from a position of strength. And this lawsuit seems to be just that, Wolf.
All right, Christina, thank you very much. Let's get some more on all of this. Democratic Congressman John Garamendi of California is joining us. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman, thanks for coming in.
Always a pleasure.
So far, and I want to get to the president's tax returns in a little while, but so far you haven't yet called for the start of formal impeachment proceedings against the president. Do you think Mueller's testimony tomorrow could change your mind?
Well, we're in the process of moving towards an inquiry of impeachment, which is a step before the actual impeachment resolution would undoubtedly come to the floor. So we're in that process. This is a very, very important moment in this whole process.
So do you want hearings to begin on impeachment?
No, an inquiry that would then provide the information that could lead to the resolution of impeachment.
So you're stopping short of formal committee hearings at this point.
We're not ready.
You just want an investigation on the part of the House Judiciary Committee.
That is in preparation so that we know all the information necessary that would be in an impeachment resolution. We're not there yet. This is a very important step, moves us forward, gives us critically important information. We're going to hear from the man who studied all of what was going on. We're going to hear his words. We're going to hear his report.
So specifically, what do you want to hear him say?
I'd like him just to read the critical paragraphs about McCann and other critical paragraphs.
The White House counsel at the time.
That's correct.
So you're suggesting there was obstruction of justice?
Well, that's what they said. They said there is evidence that there is obstruction of justice. Now, whether that leads to a criminal indictment, that was a big question, another question that might be asked.
Well, he said he couldn't lead to any charges against the sitting president based on Justice Department guidelines.
And now we have the Attorney General saying, well, maybe he could be indicted. So maybe did Was there an earlier discussion in this process with the Attorney General about indicting or not indicting? Important questions.
Well, you think that a sitting president can be indicted? Is that what you're saying?
I think they can. I don't see anything in the Constitution that would prohibit
Mueller
it.
accepted the guidelines of the Justice Department.
That was a lawyer about, a decade and a half ago that said that it wasn't possible. That was a lawyer's opinion. But the clear reading of the Constitution says absolutely nothing about indicting a president. It does say that if you're going to remove a president, you can only do that with impeachment.
Well, it's now up to Congress to make that decision,
That's
whether
correct.
to go forward. You say begin at least a very preliminary process.
A formal inquiry that would then lead to a decision to impeach. That is a resolution. Or not.
Your leadership is not yet ready for that. As you know, Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker, they're deeply worried this could backfire against the Democrats politically and focus in on this as opposed to other substantive issues that voters want to hear about, whether it's health care or infrastructure, stuff like that.
Well, you take a look at what we have managed to do over the last 4 or 5 months. We've gone to those substantive issues. They're sitting over in the Senate right now. So we're continuing to do our work at the same time that we're doing these investigations. We can do both and even more than that. We've passed the National Defense Authorization Act. That's over in the Senate now. So the work goes on. The inquiries will too.
What do you hope your colleagues on the Judiciary Committee and the Intelligence Committee will ask Mueller tomorrow?
I would hope they talk less, ask a question. Don't do all the preface to the question. Just lay out the question. Let Mueller talk. Let him have the 4.5 or 4 minutes and 45 seconds.
What do you make of Mueller's decision at the last minute to have his deputy join him up there tomorrow as he's testifying?
It'll be interesting. I have absolutely no idea why he wanted to do that. We're going to find out right away. We're going to have to wait about 20 hours.
The FBI director, Christopher Wray, he testified up on Capitol Hill today. He said Russia is still working to interfere in the upcoming 2020 election. How important is it to hear what Mueller has to say about Russia, what Russia was doing in the 2016 election?
Well, this is the first part of his report in detail about Russia's involvement in the election. Did he come to conclusion on collusion? Well, he apparently decided that there was not. But nonetheless, it's very, very important that the American public understands the way in which Russia involved itself, the way in which they tried to deflect the American attention, and frankly, feed us a lot of lies.
The president today said something that I want to get your reaction to about the U.S. Constitution, basically allowing him to do whatever he wants. Listen to this.
Then I have an Article 2 where I have the right to do whatever I want as president, but I don't even talk about that because they did a report and there was no obstruction.
What's your reaction to that?
He has always tried to be the imperial president. He is stonewalling Congress. He's already acting as though he was king of the land. He has no regard for the Constitution. It is a very serious constitutional question that is now in play, and we have to. Members of Congress and the Senate have to stand up for the Constitution, for the division of powers. And that kind of talk from this president we should expect it because that's exactly what he's been doing.
And what do you make of his decision today to file lawsuits trying to prevent the House of Representatives, the Ways and Means Committee specifically, from getting his tax returns?
Very simple question. What is he hiding? Why isn't he showing his tax returns? He didn't do it during the campaign, hasn't done it during his presidency. What is he hiding?
He says he's still under audit.
Oh, come on. Give me a break.
That's what he says.
I know what he said, but that's never been a bar to force putting out your tax returns. No, he's hiding something. What is it that he's hiding? Follow the money. There's clearly been questions that have been raised. Quite likely those tax returns would develop the information that would undoubtedly be right here on Headline News.
Congressman Garamendi, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
The breaking news continues next with more on President Trump's mindset just ahead of tomorrow's Mueller testimony. Plus, what to make of Mueller's last-minute request to have his deputy appear with him. Our analysts are standing by to weigh in on all the breaking news. We're following multiple breaking stories this hour, including the surprise last-minute request by the former special counsel Robert Mueller to have his former deputy appear with him when he testifies before the House Judiciary and Intelligence Committees tomorrow. Let's dig deeper with our experts and our analysts. And Bianna, How do you read this move that he wants his deputy to join him, to have him sitting right next to him?
We've all been trying to dissect this and figure out what's behind the move. Look, I wouldn't read that much into it right now. We know that he's been his right hand for many years. He was his chief of staff when he was the head of the FBI. Look, if anything, he could be a crutch for him. I don't know if he's going to be there for both committee sessions in the morning and afternoon, but there very well may be some questions directed towards Robert Mueller that he doesn't know the specifics of or can't recount, and he can definitely turn to him now for some more insight to it and specifics. And I know that Republicans are getting angry about this, thinking that it's sort of a last-minute change they weren't given a heads up about. If anything, it could give more clarity to many answers that Robert Mueller may have, in other regards, just said, I need to get back to you on some of this information.
You know, Jeffrey, it comes after the Justice Department sent him a letter. At his request, he asked for this letter defining the contours of what he can say, basically saying you got to stick to that 448-page Mueller report.
Right. That was a real finger-wagging letter from the Department of Justice to Mueller. Mueller knows the rules. He's already talked about what the scope is of what his testimony is going to be. He's going to decide how forthcoming he wants to be, and it's really not up to the Department of Justice to define how forthcoming he's going to be. It's going to be up to Mueller. He knows the broad outlines, but Mueller can be more expansive or less expansive under the rules that exist.
The Democrats, certainly on the Judiciary Committee, David, they're going to focus in on alleged, arguably, obstruction of justice against the President of the United States. Do you think they have a strong case?
Well, I think they think that they have a strong case that Mueller can at least paint a better picture than the written word that's in the report. I don't think it's going to change that many minds. People who are predisposed to support the president, I think by and large, think that this is a situation, well, he's the head of the government, the head of the Justice Department, he can do what he wants. People that are predisposed to think that the president obstructed justice already think that, but we'll see. I agree with Jeffrey that Special Counsel Mueller kind of knows what he can say. He knows how far he can go and where the line is. He's a war hero. He's the last Boy Scout. He's the former head of the FBI. If he decides this is his moment to sort of push the envelope, I don't think there's anything that anybody can do to stop him, but I also don't know that he will actually do that.
We'll have to wait and watch the hearing tomorrow, all the supposed 5 hours that are going to be taking place during the public questioning. When Mueller, Sabrina, gave his public statement in May, he concluded that public statement by stressing, quote, the central allegation of his office investigation was that there were multiple systematic efforts to interfere in our election, referring to the Russians. That's certainly going to be the focus of the House Intelligence Committee's questioning and where that leads.
Absolutely. And the House Intelligence Committee has a number of unanswered questions with respect to the campaign led by Moscow to interfere in the 2016 election. It includes, for example, the infamous June 2016 meeting at Trump Tower, where Donald Trump Jr. signaled that the Trump campaign would be receptive to help from the Russians, and that was also attended by Jared Kushner, Paul Manafort, other top officials in the Trump campaign. What, if anything, came out of that meeting is a question many House Democrats on the Intelligence Committee want to pose to Robert Mueller, as well as the role of WikiLeaks. Roger Stone, who served more as an informal advisor to the president, he had contacts with WikiLeaks, which disseminated those hacked emails from both the DNC and Hillary Clinton's campaign. Was there more coordination between the campaign and between WikiLeaks in releasing those damaging emails? And they also want to know about negotiations over Trump Tower, Moscow, which, of course, is what Michael Cohen has testified was an ongoing discussion between members of the Trump organization and the Russians. Ultimately, it fell through, but it was ongoing during the course of the campaign. And those close to Trump were, of course, misleading in terms of the timeline of that project. So I think those are some of the questions that you'll see from the House Intelligence Committee, where they want to stay more focused on the role of the Russians, as opposed to the House Judiciary Committee, which will focus on the actions the president took to impede the investigation.
But Jeffrey, Mueller concluded on this very sensitive issue that there was not sufficient evidence to say there was conspiracy or coordination. He didn't use the word collusion.
As every single Republican will point out tomorrow.
Right.
I mean, I think one of the very important lines of questioning from the Republicans is going to be about what Robert Mueller did not find. You did not find a criminal conspiracy to coordinate
between the Russian government and the Trump campaign.
And I think that's going to be a theme we hear over and over again from the Russians, from the Republicans, and as well they should. I mean, it's a very important part of Mueller's investigation, and they should be point it out.
And to Sabrina's point, I think you can expect to see Democrats asking Mueller why specifically he didn't interview Donald Trump Jr. regarding that Trump Tower meeting as well. They had interviewed others that had been present there. But I think that's where, if anything, you may see some of the most interesting information come out of Robert Mueller. He stated twice in those 9 minutes that he spoke the significance of Russia attacking our election system and our democracy here. He said it's something that should impact every single American and Americans should be focused on. I think you're probably going to hear him reiterate that again tomorrow and really stress the need for the American system going into 2020 to have made some significant changes going to our next election.
But that's also why it's important, given the limited time that lawmakers have to question Robert Mueller, for these committees to really stay within their purview and for the House Intelligence Committee to focus more on Volume 1 of the Mueller report, which is Russian interference in the 2016 election, and for the House Judiciary Committee to focus on Volume 2, which is potential obstruction of justice by the president, because that's what enables Democrats, who now control the majority of the House and are faced with this question of what they should do in terms of the president's alleged misconduct, to kind of build a narrative and say, look, there was a systematic effort by the Russians to interfere in the election. The Trump campaign, according to Robert Mueller, was receptive to those efforts. And this is the action that the president took to impede with that investigation. It may be the case that the cover-up is worse than the crime, but that's precisely why they want to hear from Robert Mueller directly in terms of what he and his team found.
Right. David, we know the Democrats on the Judiciary Committee, they've been going through these mock rehearsals, these drills, and we've now learned, thanks to Manu Raju and Jeremy Erb, that Norm Eisen, who's a counsel on the House Judiciary Committee, a former ethics czar in the Obama White House, former CNN contributor, senior fellow at Brookings, that he's been playing Robert Mueller in these mock rehearsals.
Right, Norm Eisen, our former colleague, he's one of the sharpest guys in town. I think he would have an encyclopedic knowledge of the Mueller report, so he would be a good person to play Special Counsel Mueller in these hearings. But Norm is, a pretty lively guy and a guy who likes to explain things. I think the big question is whether or not Mueller is going to want to explain things or whether he's going to stick to what he said in that press conference several weeks ago and just say what's in the report. I think Democrats, this is back to your point, I think Democrats could have boiled this down to 4 questions. Why not conspiracy? June 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Natalia Veselnitskaya. Why wasn't it a campaign finance violation? Was there obstruction of justice? And is Congress doing enough to protect the United States against Russian interference in the upcoming election? Somehow they moved this a whole week to get more time, even though you could really, those are the key questions in this case.
Which is why the storytelling is so significant here. Remember, the majority of the country has not read the Mueller report. I'm a bit confused as to why these hearings aren't swapped and you aren't hearing Volume 1 being told in the morning and then seeing Volume 2 really focused on with intelligence in the afternoon, or with judiciary in the afternoon, because you really get a sense of the narrative of what played out, and you go through a time arc starting with Russian interference, and then you can go to the question of obstruction, what have you. But to just have Robert Mueller go through the report that he and his prosecutors wrote themselves, regardless of what questions will be asked, I think the takeaway from him reciting his own words will be significant for many Americans who may be hearing it for the first time.
It's interesting because Norm Eisen's been playing Mueller in these mock hearings, these rehearsals. But another Judiciary Committee, Aide, has been playing Republican Congressman Jim Jordan, and who supposedly they're gearing up. He's going to be interfering or breaking in, raising all sorts of procedural issues during the course of the Democrats' questioning, and they've been gearing up for that as well.
Well, and that's smart. I mean, it's good to be prepared, and Jordan is very good at being disruptive and interjecting his views even when it's not his turn to speak. And there is nothing ever wrong with over preparing for a big event. And it seems like the Democrats have taken this seriously, as have the Republicans. And I think the committee, we can only hope that the hearing will be better because everybody's on their game.
Here's something we should be watching out. We know that Mueller is going to be very, very sensitive to the integrity of his investigation, the integrity of the FBI, the entire team. If Republicans start raising all sorts of innuendos, allegations that these guys were not fair, they were biased, they were anti-Trump, they were pro-Hillary Clinton, that presumably could spark a very negative reaction from Mueller.
I don't know how Mueller will respond to that. I do think, though, that you're talking about someone who, remember at the start of this, Even Republicans across the board were saying he was the right person to lead this investigation. He was a person of impeccable integrity. So I think it'll be incumbent on Democrats in the committee to remind Republicans of what they said on that. I think, yeah, if you're special counsel Mueller, you've got to push back on some of that stuff. But if we've gotten to a point, Wolf, where someone who, again, I said it a minute ago, is a war hero, is a former FBI, head of the FBI, and who has never been accused of doing anything wrong.
And a Republican.
And presumably was friendly with Attorney General Barr at some point in their career. If this is the guy that Republicans are saying that doesn't have integrity, then, this committee process is going to go off the rails.
But beyond, is it too late for the Democrats right now? This has been going on and on and on. Is it too little, too late?
Look, it's their make or break moment. It's their one time to get Mueller to testify before them. They're doing their job, right, as oversight. So I don't think they had any other choice. I think this is their opportunity to hear from Mueller. Hopefully expectations aren't so high that they assume that the world will be different come Thursday morning. I think that they will be satisfied to hear Mueller answer many of their questions and also read from the report. The majority of the country, though, has already moved on from this. The president likes to focus on that as well. He said he's not going to be watching. I'm assuming that he will be watching. But going back to your point about that he's a rather modest man, so I doubt that we'll hear him say, but I'm a war hero, I'm a Republican, how dare you attack me? Though I think that, as the New York Times has reported, this is going to be his 89th time before Congress. He's used to this. He knows that a lot of this is theater as well, so I think we're going to see him grounded. I think we're going to see him focused on getting through this. Remember, he does not want to be there. And I think when you have somebody who's a witness who's going to be testifying in a situation where he'd rather not be, I think things maybe will be getting under his skin, but I think he'll be measured.
It strikes me that, go ahead.
I was going to say that this is where Democrats have to be careful because their best bet is to focus on what Robert Mueller laid out in the report and having him, in his own words, really detail these 10 episodes in which the special counsel found that the president may have sought to obstruct justice. I've spoken to some Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee who do have a lot of process-related questions. Why did you not compel the president to testify? What do you make of Attorney General William Barr's handling of the report? Was he being misleading to the American public? Now, those questions serve a purpose, certainly in terms of whether or not they had all the evidence that they needed or whether they believe that there's some effort by the administration to engage in a cover-up. But what's really going to shift public opinion, or potentially even the opinion of House Democrats who have not yet been prepared to embrace an impeachment inquiry, is Robert Mueller really outlining the actual misconduct or alleged misconduct on the part of the President of the United States. The last time that you saw a flurry of House Democrats come out in favor of impeachment, it was when Robert Mueller stood before those cameras and said that while we could not charge a president with a crime, we also could not exonerate him.
You wanted to make a point?
Let me just follow up on what Sabrina said. I totally agree with you. The only thing I would add, though, it's a challenge for Mueller in that situation because it's a situation where he has already said that he can only go so far as the former prosecutor, and I do think he's going to have to make a decision on whether or not he wants to push that envelope. He strikes me as a guy that wants this to be dignified, but at a certain point, what was the whole point of him coming out of retirement to do this if he's not going to advance the ball?
Jeffrey, as significant as Mueller's testimony potentially could be, Don McGahn, the former White House counsel, if he were ever to appear before a House committee, publicly say what happened, potentially that could even be more bombastic.
Well, obviously. I mean, that's the thing that's so frustrating about this. In an investigation, you don't hear from the prosecutors, you hear from the witnesses. I mean, the Watergate hearings, the key witness was John Dean because he was a participant in the cover-up. Don McGahn was someone who was apparently recruited into a cover-up. Corey Lewandowski was recruited into a cover-up. They are the people who really could put incriminating evidence before the American people, which is why the White House is fighting so hard to keep them off stage.
I know you have read the U.S. Constitution. You're an expert on the U.S. Constitution. Yes. Article 2 specifically. I'm going to play a clip of what the President of the United States said today.
Right.
Then I have an Article 2 where I have the right to do whatever I want as president, but I don't even talk about that because they did a report and there was no obstruction.
The sound you heard was every constitutional law professor in the country keeling over That's what he thinks of Article 2. We have a government of enumerated powers, where the powers of the Congress are stipulated in Article 1. The president's powers are in Article 2. He's commander-in-chief of the military. He can make treaties. He cannot do anything he wants. That is not what the Constitution says.
He said, I have the right to do whatever I want as president.
With all due respect to the president, that is not true under any circumstances. And the idea that he would even say it is frankly rather chilling.
If I were to make a guess, it's his translation of what's been said to him by his Attorney General, Bill Barr, right? We've heard Bill Barr talk about Article 2 as well. I think this goes back to the point, regardless of Bob Mueller, who's been experienced and anticipating a lot of things, likely did not anticipate Bill Barr to come out and act the way he did after the Mueller report came out. You can't overstate the significance of those 4 pages that Bill Barr released and his interpretation of the report prior to Mueller speaking out, addressing it.
Remember, Nixon at one point said, if the president does it, it's not illegal.
And you know,
how did that work out?
That does not work out so well. But, you know, I think this is how Donald Trump views the presidency, and it's part of why he is so offended by this investigation, because he thinks, especially in something like firing James Comey, which is alleged as part of the obstruction of justice, he thinks he has the power to do it, so he can do it for any reason he wants.
Yeah, Wolf, I also think it's of a piece with so many episodes we've seen over the last 2.5 years. You know, 2 Corinthians, the Bible, what a good book, never heard of it before. Article 2, the Constitution, read it for the first time. Turns out Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. All that President Trump is like learning about the country he's leading as he's going along. And of course, he's going to overstate.
And more and more people are talking about this Frederick Douglass.
Oh, yeah, boy, he was a huge hit.
All right, guys, we got a lot more news. Stand by.